think, several PhD thesis titles in my topic, and I've only got 25 minutes to talk to you, so I apologise if I disappoint, and feel free to ask me questions after the session or catch up with me afterwards if you want to talk about anything in more detail. And I guess there's a number of themes from this morning that I'll be talking about in the specific context of New South Wales Government and where we're heading with digital government with data, and how we're considering and ensuring privacy and security in some of those initiatives. So we've talked a lot about digital, we've talked a lot about data, we've also talked a lot about customers and citizens and trust. And another key word I think that will come out through my presentation is partnerships, a really important dimension to managing security and joining up data. So in New South Wales Government, what are we doing? We had an election last year, and after that the government published its new Premier's priorities and state priorities to give a frame for New South Wales Government. And some of those are really relevant to the discussion here, and very obviously. So there's a state priority about increasing the number of digital services, moving transactions online. We've already got about 40% of transactions online, with a target of 70% in the next couple of years. We've got priorities around making it easy to do business with New South Wales Government, again, sort of cutting red tape, using digital channels, all of the things that are relevant in this environment. But we've also got priorities around some of the social challenges that all governments face, childhood obesity, reducing childhood obesity, tackling domestic violence, improving education outcomes. And I think one of the key things in that is that it requires different approaches, and I think New South Wales is really focusing on joining up services, making them more digital, making them more mobile, and also using its data to inform those outcomes. So an example of that is piloting in New South Wales social impact investment bonds. So a recent one was around tackling recidivism for parolees, and it's about different methods to create the environment in which you can really sort of have different outcomes to very age-old problems. And one of the important things about that is you need to know where you start, you need to know what the outcome is, and to do that you need to be using data in very different ways. You need to develop the single view of the customer-centric solutions, and that involves joining up data, but in a way that manages privacy and security implications. Service New South Wales has been a big success in New South Wales Government in driving that transactional end, and we heard Rachel talking about some of the things that are happening at the Commonwealth level, similarly in that sort of joining up transactional space. So some of the things that have already happened through the Service New South Wales channel is applications for licences, applications for seniors card, and there's a consistent user experience whether you're in a face-to-face shopfront, through a contact centre, or through the digital channels, which is website and mobile. But the next phase around that is digital licences. So this is moving from the plastic cards in your wallet to licences that are truly digital, and as you can imagine there's a big programme of work thinking through the implications for that, both from a security perspective and identity verification perspective. So the target around that is that by the middle of this year, there'll be some of the simple licences will already be available. Things like the responsible service of alcohol cards that we use in New South Wales will be digital. And then moving on to more complex licences over the next couple of years, like driver's licences. So there's a whole raft of issues in starting to tackle some of those priorities, starting to deliver those services in different ways that speak to the issues on the agenda today around privacy and security. But I guess one thing we know is that the people in New South Wales, the citizens, the customers, they want more joined up services, but this isn't at the expense of privacy. We talked about the just get it done, and people actually making a trade between access to a service and their personal information. But with government, I think the equation's slightly different. And so we did some research in New South Wales back at the end of 2014 around this. There was a very strong preference for more digital government, digital channels, digital services. But there was a strong feedback as well that privacy and security remained key sort of imperatives around that. Obviously, with government, the nature of the services we provide is different to a lot of sectors. Some of those services are involuntary, and we always have to be mindful of that and the trusted relationship that requires between a government and its customers. So one of the questions I was tasked with was, is joined-up government really possible? Is data exchange really possible between different tiers of government in a way that truly manages and respects privacy? And I think the answer to that is yes. There are already some good examples of data exchange and linkage. But I guess it doesn't mean, or at least it doesn't mean to me, that by sharing data across government agencies about people or between tiers of government, it's no longer about creating one giant lake in which we sort of pour all this data and that we then expect magic to happen. It's really about being a lot smarter than that, and I'll talk about some of the things we're doing in New South Wales that really try and sort of illustrate how we're trying to be smarter and how we're working with people and engaging with customers on that. So as I said, better services doesn't always mean a compromise, that there are a few in the government space who'll trade their privacy for better services, and the Australian Office of the Information Commissioner has for a number of years done a series of research surveys about the perceptions of the public to privacy. So over 57% in the most recent survey, which is in 2013, said that they were not likely to provide personal information as a trade-off for a better service. I think often we hear people talk about privacy being dead. I don't think that that's the case. I think that people are just thinking about it in different ways. I guess also that survey showed that government is reasonably well trusted as an organisation to handle personal information. There's 69% of the survey respondents thought government could be trusted to do only what it said it would do with their personal information. Not all sectors fared so well, but healthcare and financial services came out pretty well. Tech companies were included in the survey for the first time in 2013. Only 37% felt that they could be trusted. And social media was copped a bit of a hammering with only 9%. And I think that kind of points to some of the perception risk in the community. Identity fraud, misuse of personal information on social media sites. Some of these are frequent issues that are highlighted by people. So what are we doing in New South Wales Government? So the sort of policy framing for the work around what we do with data, privacy, security is the New South Wales Government IT strategy, which was updated at the end of last year, at the end of November. And one of the things that was added to the strategy as a call out in terms of the outcomes that we're driving for in New South Wales was the better insights from data. So in the latest update to the strategy, information management and data management has always been a strong theme running through the ICT strategy since it was first launched in 2012. But there's a much stronger focus on data analytics with the establishment last year of the New South Wales Data Analytics Centre, and I'll talk about that in a little while. I guess one of the other things that I wanted to call out was that we've sort of changed the language from information security to cyber security, and that's not just about picking up on buzzwords, but I think it's reflecting this sort of the partnerships that are necessary to deal with security in an increasingly complex world. So it's not about government, I think somebody talked about it earlier, about government keeping its perimeters secure and then everything's going to be fine. It's that recognition that we now work and operate in a connected ecosystem. It's much more complex, and we need to be making sure that we've got the systems and processes in place to manage that complexity. Collaboration, I think, is another key element of the strategy. Again, it's been a strong support to the ICT strategy over the last few years, but we've called out a number of areas specifically where collaboration is important. And then just the other one I wanted to mention is the legacy systems piece. So again, in New South Wales, like many places, we have a number of legacy systems that are in the process on a journey to being replaced, and recognising the risks around that, and particularly in the security context, we have an opportunity and a plan to focus on that this year. So just in terms of where we're up to with the strategy, just some of the policy dimensions. So in New South Wales Government, we've had a strong open data program for the last few years. One of the other sort of topic titles that was included was the digital economy, and data that government releases is very much a driver for some of that digital economy. But obviously there's a principles-based approach in New South Wales, as there is in many other places, which obviously doesn't involve releasing personal information as open data, but it does involve a process of thinking about, well, what data sets can we release? How do we drive that? And in October last year, a really good example was the property sales data has been made available as an open data set available on the New South Wales Globe. So this is information about house sales and house prices now freely available as open data. And again, sort of really interesting possible uses for that, particularly when you combine it with the announcement from the PSMA, who's one of the sponsors of today, about the releasing the address data as open data via the Commonwealth Open Data Portal. So all sorts of possibilities from open data. Another recent example in New South Wales is the addition of real-time data about trains and their location in regional areas to the already open data about the real-time train data and bus data in Sydney metropolitan areas. So those are really good examples of data sets that, you know, really are sort of drivers of opportunity and digital economy, but really aren't sort of compromising privacy in any way. So just a couple of other things on that. So in New South Wales, we've had a program for the last few years of consolidating the government data centres, and a big part of that program, 2 state-of-the-art data centres, has been around ensuring that those data centres meet the security requirements, and at least as part of that infrastructure and that backbone, have security built in right from the start. So that's been something that's very successful. But also as part of that has been a focus on creating a marketplace inside the data centres where industry can provide services to government within that environment. We've had a new sort of governance approach through the development of an information management framework to pull all the different pieces together around how we're managing data. So it's clear that we're focusing on outcomes, which is that data is well managed and secure, but also that it's used and shared, and we realise the value from that asset. So last year, we updated the digital information security policy for New South Wales government agencies. Again, that provides the foundation for the sort of minimum requirements that New South Wales government agencies are required to follow. But one of the things that also does, which I think has been a really beneficial for collaboration across the government agencies, is establish an information security community of practice, and we have the chair of our community of practice here this afternoon. But that's been a really important vehicle for fostering collaboration across government agencies in tackling security issues, in sharing information about security incidents, and really building capability and raising the bar across the whole of the government agencies. But specifically around data and where we're trying to take things with a data analytics perspective, The Data Analytics Centre was established by Minister Domnello in August last year. So this year has been its real sort of start-up year, if you like. In November, legislation was passed to support the Data Analytics Centre, so it's not a statutory body, but what the legislation does is, I guess, three things. It explicitly enables agencies to share data with the Data Analytics Centre. It makes it clear that it's operating within the legislative and policy framework for privacy in New South Wales. And it also calls out some specific safeguards around data. So it's clear that for the Data Analytics Centre that privacy and security are built in right from the start. So the Data Analytics Centre is going to be doing two things. Firstly, it's a broker. It will operate as a centre of excellence in New South Wales, connecting all of the different sort of entities that are involved in data analytics, providing and brokering access to data across government, and brokering relationships with the private and the research sectors as well. But it will also be doing joined up analytics projects that will be endorsed by senior levels in government to really drive and support some of those Premier and state priorities where we need to better understand what's happening, to be able to join data sets and drive new insights from that analysis. And as part of that, the role of the DAC will be about piloting tools and methodologies that really enable us to use data more smartly and more effectively. And again, privacy is an important part of that. So to make sure that we're doing this right and setting it up right, we've had a steering committee including both the Privacy Commissioner and the New South Wales Information Commissioner, alongside the Customer Service Commissioner and others, helping us set up the Data Analytics Centre and make sure that we're getting the framing right. And the initial projects that the Data Analytics Centre is involved in are all involving partnerships with outside entities. So it's recognising that New South Wales, we've talked about skills shortages in the security space. There's also skills shortages in the data space and the data science space. And so it isn't about New South Wales trying to create and grow a giant team, but about the Data Analytics Centre being a broker of that access to that research and the expertise that exists in the broader environment. So the Data Analytics Centre isn't alone in New South Wales Government in being interested in using data and linking data more smartly. And we've had for a while in New South Wales different centres of excellence and different approaches. And one I just wanted to mention very briefly is the Centre for Health Electronic Record Linkage, just as an example of sort of privacy-preserving techniques where you can do longitudinal research in the sensitive space of health. That's where it was established, but also increasingly using that as a resource, working with other New South Wales government agencies and research institutions to look at linking data sets through master linkage keys that therefore sort of are privacy-preserving in understanding, outcomes from road traffic accidents, understanding out-of-home care and education results, and all sorts of different areas and possibilities. And I guess one of the things with the data science perspective is that often we're not interested in individual A or individual B. We're not interested if it's John Carabin or if it's James Kavanagh. We're interested in the patterns that come from that and using that to inform service planning and policy making. And that's really where the Data Analytics Centre will be sort of focusing its efforts. So in summary, New South Wales Government's really focused on joined up digital approaches and new approaches to using data, and recognising that in itself can bring some new challenges, but that ensuring that privacy and security is embedded in those approaches is high on the agenda. So the Data Analytics Centre will be a key new capability in New South Wales Government for exploring some new techniques and methodologies, and that the aim is to do that in partnership with the experts in government, but also in the industry and research sectors. Any questions?
Thank you. Jeff Hull from Service Victoria. Just wondering if there's any early experience with applying the provisions that are in the legislation that underpins the data analytics capability, where I imagine, and I don't know the New South Wales specifics, but there'll be privacy policies and provisions in legislation of individual agencies. How are those issues navigated, and is there any early experience about how those very broad provisions in the legislation are going to be applied?
Yep. So I guess the Data Analytics Centre hasn't actually changed the privacy legislative landscape in New South Wales. It's operating within that existing frame, and people have a range of opinions about that, but certainly one that I recognise is complicated, and I think that's often a challenge for agencies in sharing data, is just ensuring that they're doing the right thing. And I think again this morning then people were talking about sort of risk aversion, and when it is complicated then that can lead to risk aversion. But to date the Data Analytics Centre hasn't been working in any sort of particularly sensitive areas that relate to personal information. But the involvement of the New South Wales Privacy Commissioner up front is a really important enabler of keeping things sort of, well aligned. I think the legislation, one of the key benefits is clearly articulating that agencies do have permission within the existing legislation to share with the Data Analytics Centre, because I think that cultural barrier is a really important one in terms of enabling data sharing. And I think one of the things that the New South Wales Privacy Commissioner often talks about is how that there's an awful lot that can be done, which is appropriate use of personal information within the legislative boundaries that exist, but it's helping people understand what that is. And I think that's one of the areas where the Data Analytics Centre can build capability and help people with that. But certainly to date, we haven't run into any particular privacy issues or concerns.
Hi, Stilgarian, journalist. What issues have come up, particularly with the health sharing stuff, given the rise of data re-identification techniques, which have of course blossomed in just the last few years? How's that affected your work?
So that's one of the things that comes up a lot in the open data space. So there's a real concern that even where data sets are de-identified, that with a bit of time, effort and the mosaic effect of using other open data sets, that you can re-identify. And so I think that's certainly something that perhaps people have front of mind when they're considering data sets that can be released and should be released. One of the priorities for the Data Analytics Centre is actually thinking about methodologies for robust de-identification. And I don't pretend to be an expert in data science and all the techniques that are available. I know there are people in this room who are, but thinking about how you can perturb data sets and create synthetic data sets and other techniques that in the future will become much more standard and much more rigorous in enabling us to be confident that data won't be re-identified. I think it's very hard to be absolute, to say data can never be re-identified, but I think it's the omnibus test of what's reasonable. So that if you've got somebody who's malicious and is bringing an immense computing power to the re-identification of data, you probably can't combat that. And I think it's the same as some of the thinking in risk management in the security context. You can't make your organisation 100% secure, and there's probably no point in trying, but you can make it pretty secure, and you can ensure that you're focusing on identifying those risks and managing those risks.